That was Ian Adamson.
I'm Charlie Redding.
And this episode is The World of Adventure.
Is the TRIBEathlon podcast.
Like other people might feel super stoked to go into racing. And when people are like, oh, are you excited to race? I'm like, oh, not really. Like, I like it once I'm doing it.
That was Katie Zaferes. And this episode is The Explorative Mindset. Embarking on a journey from a humble beginning to becoming one of the world's leading triathletes, Katie Zaferes' story is one of relentless pursuit, dedication, and unmatched resilience. Katie initially began her athletic journey as a runner. However, her evolution into the world of triathlons showcased her versatility and her tenacity. Katie is an American professional triathlete whose impressive consistency saw her climb from being ranked 5th in the world in 2015 to finally taking the top spot and winning the 2019 World Championships at the Lausanne Grand Final, recovering from a major bike crash in Tokyo test event to take the and the title. In 2021, Katie was part of the USA mixed relay team that won Olympic silver at Tokyo 2020, just days after winning her own individual bronze medal. So Claire and I really wanted to chat to her about how she uses a different take on and her version of visualization and goal setting to improve her results, how an explorative mindset can drive success, and why sports psychology has played such a massive role in her journey to the top. I know you're going to have loads to take away from this brilliant interview with Katie Zaferes. How would you like to grow your business whilst working less and enjoying your work life more? Well, that's how we help people at the Trusted Team. We do that through workshops, which happen in person and online. We do that through regular online learning that you can just do from your desk at lunchtime. And we do it through in-person events that make fun tax deductible. Things like golf days, dinners, wine tasting, all of that fun stuff. They help you build stronger relationships and enjoy work more. So if you want to know how we can help you grow your business and improve your work-life balance, go to thetrusted.team to find out when our next free taster event or free webinar is, so that you can find out how we can help you grow your business and get your work-life balance back. That's thetrusted.team. Come join us at one of our events.
Are you struggling to manage energy levels at work or during training? Finding it hard to know how to fit in eating for health, sport, and life? Do you want to separate fact from fiction? At Fourth Discipline, we work with leaders, professionals, athletes, and people with medical conditions. We take you on a 6-step science-led journey to manage energy, optimize performance, recover well, and improve health. We offer enhancement clinics for businesses, supportive online workshops, one-to-one coaching, and accountability. If you'd like to have a free call to find out how we can support you, then log on to fourthdiscipline.com and book your call today.
So Katie, welcome to the TRIBEathlon podcast. Really looking forward to chatting to you. I've been listening to some of the interviews that you've done recently. Know we're going to have loads to talk about here, so really looking forward to this. So always like to start these episodes to find out the story behind getting into triathlon. So I think that the story I'd love to hear about is kind of that first triathlon experience. How did you find yourself doing that first triathlon? And tell us a little bit about how that was.
So the first triathlon experience I ever had was with my dad. It was a Father's Day triathlon, just a really local race around in our community. And I'm one of 3 girls that he had. And so I was the chosen daughter, I suppose, for that race at the time. And I thought it was just something that we were doing together. I swam in high school, and I also ran in high school. So I kind of had the swimming and running bit, but never put that together in triathlon. And triathlon wasn't a thing for like my family. So I did it right after graduating high school with him. It was Like I said, it was just something we were doing for fun. I definitely didn't foresee what triathlon would bring to my life, or that I'd ever be able to say that all the accomplishments I've had in triathlon now, but it was really fun. And when I said, yes, I want to do the triathlon with you, my dad had to learn how to swim. So we were going to the pool and I was teaching him how to swim. But that was kind of like my initial experience. I remember I had like the slowest T1 because I swam in a bathing suit, and then I was putting on my shorts, putting on my shirt, putting on my tennis shoes, or my running shoes. So I had to tie them up because I had the cage pedals, and but I had the fastest T2 because I was like so much time in T1 to get ready.
And how did that first triathlon go? What was your experience of it, and why did it set you up to do what you've ended up doing for your career?
My experience was really just having fun, and I'm not sure I can say that, like, besides being introduced to triathlon, I don't think I really would have picked that to be like the part that initiated everything else. I probably would have just kind of like kept doing that type of triathlon, or like more local races, just like with my dad. But the thing that got me serious into triathlon was USA Triathlon's collegiate recruitment program. And that when I was in university, I was running Division 1, but I had this background in swimming. And my times were like not super fast in swimming, but they were solid enough to kind of catch their eye. And so when I did my 4th year of running, but I still had one more year of eligibility because I'd redshirted. So I had like my outdoor season for a 5th year. And within that time frame, USA Triathlon recruited me, saying like, hey, like we see what your skill set is now, and we think we can teach you how to ride a bike. And so it wasn't really until that I would say like that really set me up for like, oh, this is triathlon's Olympic sport. I didn't know that like a few years earlier. I didn't really know that it could be something that I would do as a living. But probably what the like South Carroll race with my dad did was just like, I really enjoyed having the 3 different disciplines. As a swimmer and runner, I would always just kind of get bored, especially with track and like running around in circles, or swimming. I just like staring at the line. So triathlon really suited me in the sense that it just kept me on my toes and kept me entertained throughout.
And how was that going to that first Olympic trials, or sorry, not the program that you just described? Sorry, I've forgotten its name.
Yeah, collegiate recruitment program.
Thank you. How was that? I know you had a long trek to get there, but tell me about that experience of kind of like the build up to it and that first experience of being there.
Well, I kind of fell into like, as I was getting out of running Division 1, the collegiate recruitment program was evolving. So like at the time that I was in college, it was really like bare bones. They would kind of give you a coach to get you into triathlon, but there wasn't much set up for you beyond that. But because of Gwen Jorgensen, and she had been in the collegiate recruitment program and she'd been coming up and doing really well, they were putting a lot more resources into funding this program. And so while I was getting into it, it was starting to evolve into like a bigger thing. And by the time I like finished with college or university, I was debating like, okay, now what do I want to do? I got my degree in physical education. Do I want to go teach? I was applying to grad schools to go into like health education as well, and community health. And then I had this option now from the USA Triathlon to basically come out to the Olympic Training Center and like commit to there and really try to give triathlon a fair chance of me qualifying for the Olympics. And you have to understand, like for me, I didn't grow up wanting to be an Olympian because I always was like, well, do you know how many people make the Olympics? Like I was pretty big, like not a cynic, but like I just knew it wasn't like, it was a risk to go into triathlon versus physical education to be a teacher, or like I couldn't guarantee what my outcome was or what my future would look like in that. But I also knew that's an opportunity that you don't get a lot of, and that it would be silly not to say yes and take the chance. So I said yes. My dad agreed to drive with me out to Colorado Springs from Maryland, which is about a 24-hour drive. And we are not the type to just like go all in for the trip. So we split it up into about 4 days, I think, stopping along the way. There was some bad weather, football games he was wanting to watch. So and then right about an hour from getting into Colorado Springs, I said, Dad, I don't want to do this. Like, let's go home. Because I was scared. And it was a lot of unknown to me. And I mean, just thinking about the Olympics, like, and Olympians, like that's pretty daunting, or it just yeah, it was just nerve-wracking to say that could be me, or that was something I wanted to do. And my dad, and I've been very lucky with my parents are amazing. And he had told me, he said, well, Katie, like, give it a shot, stay the first like week or so, and if you don't like it, then I'll fly back out, we'll drive back home together. Like, it was a no risk type scenario, because all I had to do was give it a shot. And um, if I didn't like it, then we would just do something different and pivot. But I think by him saying that, it just freed me to try, and with no expectations from him. And like, it just opened up the doors for me, and I never ended up calling him to come pick me up.
I kind of guessed that bit at the end. Yeah. So what do you class as your first big success? What's your first big success in the sport?
I would probably say my first World Cup win in Palamos. And it's funny because I had just gotten into the sport, and I think it was probably like my third or fourth race. I hadn't done more than 5 races as a professional by that point. So I didn't really understand what that actually meant, like, of winning a World Cup, being so fresh into the sport. But now when I think about it, like, I can look at that achievement as probably like the first time where I was like, oh, did quite well. Also, my first 2 like professional races and continental cups, they were a little advanced, because Joel Filial, who is actually now my coach, his squad was training in Florida at that time. So his whole squad was going to Claremont and Sarasota to race, which are typically like the lowest level of racing. But you had like Sarah True there, Alicia Kay, like Hella Friedrichsen, Paula, like all these like people who wouldn't typically be racing that level of racing. So it was a good Continental Cup to start with, because I think it just set my expectations of what the level is of racing really high.
And did you, like, because you had success so quickly, did that sort of was that a help for you from a development point of view, or was it in some ways a hindrance as well, because maybe you thought you'd got somewhere that you hadn't quite at that point?
It was really smooth for me, that transition. And I think part of it was I was still learning the sport. So I didn't, even though I was achieving things and doing well in my races, I still didn't have quite the comprehension of what that meant. So it wasn't like I felt like I was crushing it at that time, because I knew there was still higher places to get. And I hadn't actually achieved like racing at the like World Triathlon Championship Series level, or like going to the Olympics at that point. So for me, I feel like I was just taking it step by step, as just like, I'm still trying to figure out the sport. So I didn't have any pressure. I didn't feel pressure, at least at that point, not in the same way that I would in a few years. Because it was really just like kind of figuring out like, hey, like, what am I doing? What is this? Like, how do you draft on the bike? Like, how do you travel? Like, it was just a lot of new things for me. So I was really centered in that. And I was really present, I think, because I just couldn't be looking forward, because I didn't know what that looked like.
Brilliant. And I'd love you to tell me, there's 2 stories that really stood out for me when I was listening to you speak. The first was the contrast between having a crash in, I think it was Tokyo, and then 2 weeks later becoming world champion. So that to me stood out as an incredible turnaround from disappointment to success. Tell us about that story first.
Yeah, so I had one of my best years in 2019. I was winning multiple races. I'd been on the podium consistently for years before that, and kind of like climbing my way up in the World Triathlon Series ranking, but I hadn't won consistently. And so 2019, I was winning consistently, feeling really good going into the Tokyo test event, which was in August of 2019. prior to the Olympics being pushed back a year. And in the race, like pretty early on in the bike, I believe, I ended up crashing, and it was a really silly crash. Like I was going straight. I never like thought I would crash going straight, but I did into a barrier, and I ended up getting like 23 stitches in my mouth, having a pretty big impact to like my arm and my leg, and not finishing the race, ending up in the hospital instead. And I was pretty like, though there was a lot of feelings at that point, because I remember like being in the ambulance trying to like hear how the Americans did, to know how many Americans qualified for the Olympics in that race. And then also, like, regardless of the Olympics and who was going to be selected, there was also the World Championship that I'd set myself up really well before the Tokyo test event to claim at the end of the year. And so when I'm in it, I was like, well, shoot, did I just like ruin my chance of going to the Olympics and ruin my chance of like being world champion? And so I like was mostly fine, besides like my mouth and and I broke my nose, but like I was mostly fine. And I also have learned, unfortunately, because I've crashed other times with my face as well, that the face heals very quickly. Um, but at the same time, what it did was it hit my confidence that I'd kind of grown to have on the bike with my skills and being confident. And going into Lausanne, which was the grand final, it was only a couple weeks later. It was a pretty technical course, and I remember talking to my sports psychologist before it, and just like trying to physically recover at the same time I'm trying to mentally recover from the Tokyo test event crash. And I was talking to her, and she's like, well, maybe your goal is just to get around the course safely. I'm like, I've never had that as a goal, like like prior to the race. I mean, like now you're like, well, that's a pretty good goal, but like that wasn't what I was thinking. And so my like mantra became, instead of thinking like about all the deficits and all like where my brain was at with not feeling confident, I decided to kind of switch that and said like, okay, like, well, if I need to be more conservative going into the corner, I'm strong enough to make it up on the flats, or I'm strong enough to do it on the hills. So it's taking places where I wasn't feeling super confident and maybe second guessing myself, and turning it into like, well, I'm still like powerful. I can handle these challenges, I suppose. And so when I actually got on the start line for Lausanne, like I did like my normal, luckily my body healed itself like enough to like feel mostly good. Still had like a lot of nerves, but recognized that like that's okay. Like, I'm always nervous before races, so a little extra nerves is fine. And then just like having the confidence that I put in the work, that I was ready. And Joel, also my coach, like I'm surrounded by an amazing group of people. So I think that's also helped, because Joel, who obviously knew I had been doing really well in the races prior to this, he like never put the pressure on me to be like, you need to, like, it was basically to like, let's see what we can do. Let's see what position we can put you in going into Lausanne. But it was never like outcome based. It was always just come back to your process, come back to your process. And that's what I did. And in the race, like, yeah, I had a really good race. I had to finish, I think, 14th to claim the world championship, but instead I ended up winning it, which is probably like, I mean, Tokyo was amazing because winning medals is really cool, but Lausanne is probably one of the best, well, like feelings I've had. Also, my dad and my mom and my husband were all there for that, and it was just really neat to, like you said, be able to bounce back after something that I thought could affect my chance of becoming world champion.
I think, go on, Claire.
It was really interesting to hear about, and we often talk about sort of psychology behind the athlete and going into races. Just from what you've described, do you think that you're working with a sports psychologist, but also developing your own psychology since that crash, has that kind of developed over time? So do you have a kind of a way of thinking or a strategy going into races now that's maybe developed over time, or from events like the crash, for example?
Oh, for sure. So like before basically Rio in 2016, well, in high school and college, I never worked on my mental like side of things. I actually probably went the opposite direction and saw it as like a weakness if I needed to work on it, which probably told me that it, like now looking back, I'm like, well, that probably means I should have worked on it then. And then like going into Rio, like I saw the value in it, but I don't think I really knew what place it had in my training. So I would use like sports psychology and talk to sports psychologists more reactively. So it'd be like, if I was like freaking out or getting really nervous about the race, I'd be like, oh, I want to talk to someone. Like, and that changed after Rio. I feel like I took Rio and I really reflected on it in a lot of ways. And it was like a big catalyst for like how my career developed after that. But one part of that was I realized I wanted to talk to a sports psychologist more regularly, and I wanted to speak to a sports psychologist that I felt was a good fit for me, not necessarily the first one who was kind of like presented to me or like said like, oh, this person can talk to you. I actually sent an email to the USOPC, like mental health services, and I said like, hi, like I'm Katie, and these are what I consider my strengths and weaknesses. Like, who do you think would be a good fit for me? And that was a big part of, I talked to Karen Cogan and I've been talking to her since Rio. And um, I basically talked to her probably not so much during the off season, but during the racing season, probably like twice a month or so. And she's always there for me. Like if I like need anything more. So for instance, after the crash, I think I talked to her a little bit more between the two races. And um, so I feel like I just think now how much the mental side of things really separates the athletes in what they're capable of doing. And I feel like the other thing I've learned is like I had ideas about the different skills involved with different mental strategies, but I had this idea how they were supposed to be done, like visualization. I was like, oh, you visualize for swimming and you need to visualize like your whole race, like down to like the second you touch the wall, which probably is amazing. And some people do. But for me, like I actually have my sports psychologist do guided visualizations, or I write out because I really like to write and have like a journal and do handwritten things. And so I'll like actually write out my race before it happens. And it's pretty incredible to me to like now look back on those. Like I think I wrote out Lausanne and like my Tokyo race, and to have those to look back on now. And it just helps me be really clear about what that process is. It's never like I want to be like first place. Like that's not what I'm thinking about. It's more thinking about like everything else.
Mm-hmm. And do you find yourself sort of going back to that in races? So can you easily kind of transport yourself there in terms of thinking about that process when you're racing? So if things aren't going quite as you were imagining, are you able to kind of go back there and sort of think your way through it?
Yeah, I feel like I have enough strategies now that I can. So I like the main strategies I would say I use are like visualization before the race, segmenting during the race, mantras during the race, um, and probably a whole bunch of others. But I read a book called Let Your Mind Run by Dina Castor, and I'd recommend it to everybody because something she says and that really resonated with me was you have like a toolbox. It's not necessarily like one strategy that works for you all the time, but it's a toolbox of mental strategies, and you're just shifting through. And one may help you for like half a second, and but like another one might be able to help you for a couple minutes. But it's being able to have a robust toolbox so that as like things happen, you can rely on that to pull out what you need and to kind of channel through each of them.
No, really
I
important.
yeah, it is absolutely really important, and I really wanted to chat to you about this whole visualization concept. So I love the idea of journaling visualization. I think that I've not heard anybody doing it that way before for a race. So I love that, and I think I can see why that would work really, really well. So I'm definitely going to take that away. But how do you also sit there and kind of mentally kind of visualize the race in advance of it? And if you do, kind of what's that process look like?
Yeah, so when I do it mentally, when I'm doing my visualization, it's as long as I can like do that and not be distracted and like have like clear visual thoughts. So I'll go to writing when I can't when I'm having trouble focusing, and when I need to like, I'm like, oh, just closing my eyes isn't working. Like I'll start writing it just so it's clear I'm doing it. I'm going through like those motions. And then also the guided visualizations where I'll talk to my sports psych and I'll tell her like, these are my key things that I want to do. And then she'll give me like, so I can put in my headphones and listen to her kind of talk me through a race, and I'll fill in the gaps with it. So those are the three, I would say, styles of visualization I use. And it starts from when well, it can start before I even get to the race, but it starts specifically like getting to the venue, like being able to like see what it looks like. I mean, a lot of our venues we go to multiple times. So like the more I've been to races, sometimes I can piece together that part of the visualization better than other races that I haven't been to. Like how I feel seeing, I'll visualize like how I feel seeing competitors, and how I like the nerves I have before the race, or how my warm up goes, because actually that's like probably like setting the tone for the race is like all those initial feelings before you even get to the start line. And like if you can kind of like feel them or be aware of them, then that makes me feel better come race day, because I'm like, well, I already like knew this was going to feel this way. So it still feels uncomfortable, but it's not a surprise, and it's not like saying anything negative about my preparation. It's just kind of like, this is how it is for me. Like other people might feel super stoked to go into racing, and when people are like, oh, are you excited to race, I'm like, well, not really. Like I like it once I'm doing it. But like, and then so then visualizing like kind of my key things that I want to do. So a lot of that's like getting out fast in the first part of the swim, and kind of like moving up, forward focus on the first buoy, being okay with like contact, like making contact with other people in the water, and just like then visualizing coming out of the water and going into transition, like really going through like goggles and cap in the box, like helmet on, like go, like grab the bike and go. And I think between also that, it's like being rehearsed so many different times in my head, and also having like clear like language of like specifically for transition, when you're like goggles and cap and box, helmet on, grab the bike and go, like it makes it a lot less distracting, or like feel like you have to be doing a lot more. And then yeah, going through the bike, and depending on my visualizations, I would say they can take anywhere from like 5 minutes to like 15 or 20 minutes. And yeah, just kind of keep going through the whole race in that way. And then when I finish the race, I'll usually like take the moment to like reiterate like, oh, you just finished the race, you gave it your all, like and then go through again, like I had a good swim where I like got out fast, and like kind of break down those key components as I cross the finish line, saying what I did well, and like kind of like an open grateful heart of like being there with like Tommy and Kimball and like my family and teammates and coach and everything. And then yeah, and then it's done.
Brilliant.
I think it's great to hear the way that you kind of talk through it. And I the fact that you kind of get to the end, and then you go through the positives about it as well, and not actually visualizing necessarily getting to the end of the race and winning, or being on the podium. But it's really good to hear how you do it, and actually how often you're doing it as well.
It made me think, and I can't remember where I've heard this recently, but it was in a business context rather than a sporting context, and it was around people, particularly like the example I think was public speaking. So you clearly know that you're going to get nervous before a race, because you kind of document that, so that when you then feel nervous, it's not a surprise. Do you also ever try and kind of basically try and tell yourself, I know those nerves are actually part of the excitement of getting to race? Do you try and kind of reaffirm those feelings into other feelings that are good ones, as opposed to perhaps negative ones?
Yeah, the most common one I do is nerves mean I'm ready, nerves mean I care.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what I put with it. And actually now it's almost like if I'm not nervous, then I get nervous. Because I'm so used to having them.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. And the second story, which you've kind of just touched on skirtingly, is the contrast, I think, between your performance in Rio and your performance in Tokyo. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how, you've told us about how Rio didn't go according to plan and how sports psychology helped you as a result of that. But tell us about Tokyo, but maybe with the contrast of Rio.
Yeah, so in Rio, I would say like I was just coming off like a really great, I won my first World Triathlon Series event, like the race before going to Rio. I was like, had been on multiple podiums consistently. So I would have considered myself like a podium contender for the Rio Olympics. But going into the race, and we'd done the Rio test event, so I kind of knew it, but I still didn't feel like super comfortable, as everyone was talking about this steep uphill on the bike, which I didn't have a problem with. But the thing that got me was the downhill on the other side. And it just made me super anxious. I didn't feel confident with it. And really, my mind was just revolving around that downhill, which was probably like, I mean, I think it was a 10-lap bike, and it probably was less than 5 minutes total of the like 2-hour race. So, but that's what I was stuck on, and just nervous. And I was like at the Olympics, but I was really focused on the race, and I didn't want to think about the excitement of the Olympics because I wanted it to be like race oriented and just like, so I was just really tunnel visioned, I think, towards my actual race. And then I did the race and I finished like, I mean, I did okay on the bike. I stayed with the main group, but then when I got to the run, I didn't like do anything. I had a pretty bad run. And I think part of that is I was so focused on my deficits on the hill and like not feeling confident on that I didn't even think about the run, and the run felt long and hard too. Like, so, and then I finished and I was disappointed with myself with the race. And then also because we were the second to last day of the Olympics, the Olympics was basically over and I just kind of missed it. And we went to the closing ceremonies and that was really cool, but I just felt like I didn't take in the Olympics as I would have wanted to. And like when you think of people thinking of the Olympics and how I think of the Olympics, like it's an amazing experience and it's something that you really should like really lean into, that the fact that you get to have this experience. But I just kind of like missed it. And so afterwards, there was like a lot of reflections, like I said, and a few of them were talking to a sports psychologist, having like a nutritionist more regularly, speaking, like doing strength, finding a strength person, to also do more consistently, putting in like bike skills more intentionally. We would do bike skills, but not in like the same way as a race. And those were like a few things. And then obviously with the sports psychologist working on the mental side of things. But the other part of it was, if I ever get the opportunity to go to another Olympics, which I definitely did not take for granted that was going to be something that I would get to experience again, then I want to experience it. And I want to take in the whole atmosphere of the Olympics and what it means to be there, no matter what my result is, because the result isn't going to last that long. Like, but having the feelings of everything else really will. And so for me going into Tokyo, a lot of people, like, there's a lot of negative pieces around it with COVID and how the isolation, no fans, no family, which definitely was impactful to the whole atmosphere. But at the same time, before I like did well in my race, like I love that we got to be in the Olympic Village. I love that we got to, because in Rio, we were about an hour and a half or so from the village. So we stayed at our venue instead for up leading into the race. But I love that we got to be around it. I loved like being with the like USA team. And I felt like we had such good camaraderie in Tokyo and like support of one another. And just like really like being with the moment. And especially because my lead up into the Tokyo Olympics was really bad. Like, my dad passed away in April of 2021 and the Olympics was in July of 2021. And I got selected by discretion, in June. So like, it wasn't a lead in that you you would want, or like you always want to make it as early as possible. And so to come away from Tokyo, like I felt like I just pulled from all my experiences from like the like how many years of doing, I guess like 8 years of doing triathlon professionally, where within the race, like I was like, I've raced races in the rain. I'm adaptable because I've done this race. Like, be ready. Like, don't get too far ahead of yourself because you come off the bike in a good position. Like, you really need to like keep that position for the run. And so like I think that was the coolest thing finishing Tokyo was I just felt like I did everything right. I felt like I was so grateful for being at another Olympics and having to get like really cool experiences and taking it all in. And then I thought on the race course, I just like used everything I'd learned. And I said I was probably like the happiest bronze medalist there ever was. And I still feel that way. like, um, and I don't know if that would have been different another year, like if 2019, because I felt like I was in a better place, probably physically and like my performances. So I think Tokyo was special in that way. It was under pretty unsavory circumstances and still being able to race like myself.
And how did the two medals compare to you? How did the two kind of, because obviously you got the team relay as well. How did they two both compare? How do you compare them in your mind?
Oh, it's so hard because they're very special in very different ways. The bronze medal individual is, I think, just I was so proud of myself for like being able to put that together when like my lead in was really not great. And I mean, not, and that wasn't physically like training bounced back that like probably like the month and a half like leading into the Olympics, I was having really solid sessions, but the year definitely wasn't like 2021 leading into the Olympics definitely wasn't very good. And I had two of my worst races right before the Olympics, probably of my career, and swims especially. So like going into Tokyo, I was like had to manage the nerves I had around the swim because I'd had such terrible swims in both Yokohama and Leeds, which were the two races that led into the Olympics. And so basically it was my mantra going into the Olympics was I know how to do this, like, and just like remind myself that I know what I'm doing and I can do it well. And like when we drove in for Tokyo for the start of the individual race, I had been practicing the starts with like Jess Learmonth and Georgia Taylor Brown and Summer Rappaport. And when we got into the race, like it was such a smooth, clear start. And I was like, surely there's like this other pack to the left of us. Like there must be more people coming. And I like breathed to the left and it was clear. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how am I like third, like third like it was just maybe some, I don't actually know who was in front of me, and then I was the third person. And so I think like I feel like the individual race, it was just I was most proud of that, but then also for the mixed team relay, it was amazing to do that and be part of history in the sense that it never was an like hadn't been in the Olympics before then, and with a team for USA Triathlon that I don't think anyone would have like put together like to the if the Olympics would have happened as it should have in 2020. Like I don't think that anyone would have expected our team to be the team. And I was so proud of each of us because like we'd all kind of gone through our own things and like we're able to, it was just like a resilient team, I think, as well. Like so they are both equally special, and I'm not going to choose which one.
Brilliant. Yeah. What about and Paris next?
We're trying for it. I never thought I was going to come back after starting a family, but I also really like my job, and I was like, well, we're going to see how it goes. And I think one of the things I've realized is if something's not working, you can always pivot. And I mean like not working in the sense like if it's not the right balance for like me and my family. But so far we've done like 5 races, I think, and Kimball's gone to all of them. and my mom or a friend has traveled with us. Tommy's been there as well, but he works at the races, so we always have to bring an extra support person. And it's been amazing. And I reflect on it thinking like, wow, I can't imagine if we would have just not had, like, not done this, how much we would be missing out on, because it's pretty special just having, like, specifically like Kimball experience it, where I know he's only 11 months old, so I don't know how much of it he'll remember, but like some of my favorite things is basically at every race we've gone to, it's like the staff at the hotel or like breakfast or a cafe, and they're smitten with Kimball and take him, like, they'll just pick him up, take him away, talk to him in Spanish or Italian or whatever language, and like it's my favorite thing is just seeing him meet new people and really like experience other cultures, and also be a part of my triathlon community and meet like my friends, my coaches, my competitors, all the staff there, all all the officials, like basically everyone with World Triathlon. And I just think that's so special because triathlon has shaped me and been there for me in the best times and the worst times, and I'd be sad if Kimball missed out on it.
Brilliant. And we've heard a few people on this podcast talk about baby EPO, I think it gets termed as. Have you seen any performance difference coming back since having Kimball?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I would say it is much harder, and I don't feel like a superwoman. And my training wouldn't show that I'm a superwoman. It's a lot more challenging, like logistically, and I think there's something to be like, I think like when people talk about like mom power, like I for sure think that there's something to that, but it's mainly because I feel like you just have to be a lot stronger to be able to balance like having a kid traveling and racing and training and being able to do like all of that well.
Do you think, going back to the sports psychology, do you think it also impacts your why?
Probably, yeah. I think I go into, well, I think there's a couple reasons for that. One of them being I never really expected to come back. And I also like, I guess I'm back to kind of when I first started triathlon and mentality of like, well, excuse me, like this is a very big challenge and this is a really new lifestyle and a new process for me. And I don't quite know what I'm doing, like like on a day-to-day basis with Kimball. Like we're learning as we go, with figuring out that balance. And so I think it really makes you have to be present in it. And the other part of that is like when you finish, like you're saying, like no matter how I feel about my race, Kimball's there like smiling at me with my mom who like or like I said, a friend or any like support person who comes with us. And it just, I feel like I've kind of learned over the years to go into racing and training and all these experiences with a lot of gratitude. But like even more so now, like the fact that we get to do this with him, but also the people that make it possible to to do it with him, because if it was just me and Tommy, there's absolutely no way like we would be able to keep doing this and keep doing it at a high level. But luckily we have like a lot of amazing people in our life, and I think that's what keeps it into perspective for me.
How do you just thinking about, you were talking about like, well, I was about to say work-life balance, and it is work-life balance. For lots of athletes, like particularly triathletes that are trying to kind of train, have a family life, they come home from work, they're cooking, trying to cook for their children and family. How does all that work? I appreciate he's only 11 months old, but how does that work at home on a day-to-day basis in terms of fitting in your training between the two of you, looking after a child, getting food, like, so from my background, I'm always interested to know, how do people fit in making meals, making sure they're kind of eating around family and training life?
Well, we have help on all of it. So like one of the things with USA Triathlon is that they have given us a lot of like support that we can use kind of as needed. But one of those things that I've kind of figured out with Kimball is trying to figure out where I need to manage my energy and what I need support on and what I can do well myself and balance. So like I think the biggest hit like we take as like parents or like athletes is basically the recovery. Like I don't recover because that part is there's no time when I'm like I'm either engaged in training or I'm engaged with Kimball, and like there's not that much time to actually recover. So I feel like that's like the biggest hit. But for nutrition, I was talking to a dietitian earlier this year when I realized like I need some help. I'm not making good choices. I'm tired, and um can you help me with meal planning? And so she did a great job. She gave me like all the plan, the grocery list. All of the meals were super easy and not very time consuming to make, but I was still like just not doing them and just like going back. And so she's like, would it help if I like brought the meals over to you at the beginning of the week? And like they were already like all you had to do was put them in a pan basically, and you'd have them in your freezer so they'd be ready. I'm like, oh yeah, like that would probably help. Like
Really helpful.
but like so that was something that was a huge factor. And like you said, just because nutrition I do think is so big into performance. And like I don't follow any strict diet, but at the same time I want to make sure that I'm eating good food like majority of the time. And so that's been super helpful, and she's been doing that. We also have a babysitter come like basically 6 out of 7 days, and it'll be for like 4 hours from on average. And that'll allow like me to go train, Tommy to be on his work call, or Tommy to train with me like on the weekends. We just started having someone come in so that Tommy can run with me and bike with me. And so that took a lot of time to figure out like what we need. And I think I felt some of that mom guilt of like bringing in a babysitter for like the weekend, especially like on a weekend, just because I feel like it's like unconventional to like have your kid be like watched by someone. But also because like Tommy and I in theory could figure it out where like we wouldn't necessarily need childcare based off like we could adapt our schedules to make it work that one of us was watching it. But we realized we like needed the help. And we still get to do a lot with Kimball, like in the sense of well in general, but like I was thinking more of training. Like Tommy will like run out to me with Kimball in the well, I want to say stroller, but you guys don't call it in the buggy.
We know what you mean.
And so like for my long run the other day I ran from the house and started doing my workout, and then Tommy drives out with Kimball to a parking spot, and because we can run from our house all on greenways to another trail, they come the opposite direction on the trail and then to the greenway. And so we do that probably like at least 3 times a week. And it's really nice because it like just in like a lot of different ways, but I love destination runs. I love having company, and I love Kimball getting out, and I love doing it with my family. So like it's just like we were definitely figuring things out.
Like formulating new routines and new habits, isn't it? Just having to change things.
Yeah. And also like for racing it was really different for me because I'm like someone who really shuts down race week, where I really just like doing my own thing. I don't really like to conform to anyone else's schedule. And I just like quiet time and just to like chill. And that's obviously not happening with an 11, like at least not with our 11-month-old. He's quite busy. He's walking around and well, basically running. He likes chase. So now it's like all leading into the race, like it'll just be like a normal balance up until basically like the Thursday and Friday before, where like I've started to learn how to better communicate what my needs are, where I'm just like, okay, can you have Kimball from like 9 to 12 and just like I'm going to go train and I'm going to just have some like time to myself. And then like, we'll come back, go to the pool or something. And then like the same thing, like the day, like normally the day before the race, my mom will, or whoever it is, will be like on like pretty much full Kimball duty on the day before the race and race morning.
The wonderful thing and challenging thing about children is that mine are quite a lot older than yours, is that just when you think you've got that schedule and routine sussed, it then changes again. It's like it's an ever-moving target. But when they're at this stage, it's lovely that you've got that flexibility, haven't you? One of the things that I've heard you reference a few times when I've been listening to other interviews is you mentioned goal setting quite a lot. And I'm a massive fan of setting goals and not just having systems to set goals, but obviously systems to achieve them as well. Tell me a little bit about why you see goal setting as important, and also how you go about goal setting. Is there any structure or system, or tell me what it means to you?
So goal setting to me means the process of the race or training. I tend to, I guess, do it a little bit more concretely with races where I'll have, and I guess it's definitely goal setting. Okay. I was questioning whether it was goal setting or not, but where I'll like write out about 8 to 10 specific things within the race that I would like to achieve or I would like to do well. And my relationship with goal setting is I think it just makes it really clear what my intent is in the race. And also, so like a lot of the times for me, it will have to do with, like I said, like getting out fast to the first buoy, like having urgent transitions, like working on my gearing in and out of cornering or positioning, like coming into T2. And like with our type of racing, being especially when there are goals on the bikes, we have about 8 to 10 laps in an Olympic distance race. And so being aware that I may not crush it every single corner, but having those goals in my head each time. And this kind of is a little out of what you asked me, but I think what I learned also with racing is it's kind of like I do much better with a see what I can do mindset than like I need to do this, and using racing as like practice more so than a test. I feel like my relationship with racing prior to a few years ago was like a pass fail. Like if I don't do well at the end of the race, then that was like a failed race, or that was bad, or like, and walk away really, really disappointed. And I can still be disappointed after a race that doesn't go like as well, or that I don't do what I would like to do. But I think I have a lot more healthy of a relationship with racing now, where I don't feel like it's a reflection of my worth. I don't feel like it's a reflection of even my capabilities. I feel like it's just like a good example or a good way to see where I'm at and what I need to improve on. And the other great thing about triathlon that I love is there's always something you can reflect on within your races that went well. And there's always things that you can reflect on that you need to work on. And so I feel like with my goal setting, it's trying to hit those 8 to 10 things within the race, and then also be able to finish the race and reflect on like, okay, like what went well, what do we need to work on, what was this race specifically, and what is like, do we need to change the whole system? Like, because I feel like sometimes you can be really reactive after a race, and I don't always think that's healthy, where it's just like one race where you didn't do something super well. So it's kind of like, should we change anything in training, or do we just need to wait till like things just go better another day, slash you consume like all the training and all the effort that you're putting in.
Brilliant. And I think that kind of, it reminds me of a quote, and it might be a Tony Robbins quote, but it's essentially, there's good experiences and learning experiences, which is essentially what you're saying, isn't it? And it's not just about the outcome, it's about learning from the ones that didn't go quite according to plan. Is all of your goal setting short? Because that was all very race, like my goals for this specific race, it's quite short-term goals. Do you do longer-term goal setting as well, sort of like 3-year goals, 1-year goals, that sort of stuff, or is that less important to you?
I would say it's probably less important to me, only because I think I'm pretty like clear with it in without doing it. But at the same time, I have a passion planner. That's my like normal day-to-day planner, and it actually has it for you so that you do it like leading into the year, where it has your like, well, I can't remember now, but it's like, actually, I think it's almost halfway through the year. So it's actually what I should be doing probably this week. But the like 3-year, 5-year, 10-year goals, what would you like to like achieve in, I think one is 3 to 6 months or something. So, and that would be like, I would do that. And also when we do with USA Triathlon, they send out like an athlete, um, I forget what they call it, but basically something we need to fill out with our goals for the year, every single year. So at that point, like I'll think about like more long-term goals. And again, I still try to stay away from, it's usually just my shorter process goals expanded, like the things I want to do better. Like a lot of the times we'll also be still working on bike skills and being like more confident and comfortable and doing that well. And it still isn't about like qualifying for the Olympics or like that. I usually won't write on it.
I was hoping you were going to tell me a story of like 10 years ago, you wrote down that you were going to appear at 3 Olympics or something, and this was the materialization of, but apparently not.
No, I did write we wanted to have a family, and that's happened. So
well, there you go, the magic of achieving goals.
Actually, I would have to look back if I did write. Maybe I'll get back to you on it, what one looked at 3 years ago, and because the thing I probably haven't done on the longer term ones is follow up quite as much to see where I'm at with it. So I'll get back to you.
That is a good practice to do. It's really good. I've been writing down my goals every quarter for probably now 16 years, and when you go back and look at the goals that I was setting 16 years ago that seemed like massive unachievable goals, they're all done. So it's it's a therapeutic exercise to do. Now I know you're well read. You've mentioned one book already, Let Your Mind Run. But we always ask for book recommendations on this podcast. So any other books that you found to be really helpful in your journey or find yourself recommending?
I really liked Mind Gym.
Mind
Gym. It's
and who's
pretty
that
like,
by?
oof.
Don't
We'll
worry, we can Google it afterwards.
Yeah. Which is a pretty simple book, but it's like one that as I read it, really resonated with me, like the different, it's gives a lot of different skills type things. And then what's excuse me, the one where it's like the daily habits.
Atomic Habits.
Yes.
By James Clear. What did you take from Atomic Habits?
Just that it doesn't have to be very big, and that like vast goals, or like your habits can start. Actually, that was one of the reasons I started doing like 10 minutes of core a day, because it's like I feel like a lot of people will skip things because they're like, well, that's too big of a commitment, or I'm not able to like go to the gym for 30 minutes to an hour. And so trying to do like making little things seem worthwhile, and also stacking of those habits, so that like I would do a checklist in my planner of like, I mean, it would probably say like 10 minutes of core, take a nap, take like my vitamins, do visualization, have like quality time with Tommy. Like those are kind of be like daily like checklist things I would do. And what I realized is that like I could do all of them from like 8 p.m. like and beyond, and like get like a significant, I mean, besides I'm not going to take an 8 p.m. nap, but like you could pretty much get all of those different things that I felt were like in like life or day enhancing you could do them all in a really short amount of time.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love Atomic Habits. I think it's a great book, and I think the habit stacking concept is fantastic. So that's brilliant. And one of the traditions we've got on this podcast is to get the previous guests to ask the next guest a question without knowing who that guest will be. So the last guest was 7 times world obstacle racing champion, a guy called Ian Adamson. And I think Claire's got his question lined up for you.
Mm-hmm. So Ian asked, what do you do in your athletic life that makes your home life better?
I feel like it's a lot with the mental side of things, and just like having awareness and trying to stay present, and like everything, I would say everything I've learned on the mental side of things with sport has transferred to like home life. And that would probably be the bigger takeaway I'd have from all the mental skills I've learned, is just how it impacts my day-to-day life of like being like less reactive and more like patient and more adaptable, and being able to break things down into smaller, like more manageable pieces day to day, and just being like taking life as a learning experience, I would say, where I used to think like life had to go a certain way to be considered successful. And now I realize, like, specifically, if I decide that racing at the highest level and being a mom to Kimball isn't for me, like that doesn't mean I failed. It just means it's not for me, and I can do something different. And so I think that's been like my biggest takeaway, and so probably just the mental strategy and doing like sports psychology.
Brilliant.
I
Love
suppose,
that.
to like make it a smaller answer.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Great answer.
And one of the other things that we've just started for this season of the podcast is to ask listeners to pose a question, again without knowing who they're posing the question for. And James has come in with an absolutely brilliant question. So in the world of cycling, I don't know if this translates to the US or not. In the world of cycling, we have a saying that is N+1, where the right number of bikes to own is N+1, where the current number of bikes is N. So in other words, you always need one more bike. Other than bikes, and perhaps it's not bikes for you as it might be for me, but is there another item in your life where you apply the N+1 principle, where you can never really have quite enough of them? There's always room for one more.
I really have to think about this. Also, when I first heard this question, I had to Google it. And what comes up is something about atoms and physics. And I'm like, I don't know any of this. Okay, so other than bikes, what I'm trying to think of what I lose the most. Oh, it's a tough question for me.
I guess it doesn't have to be in sport, actually. It could be in life. So is there something that you always need one more of?
I would say pens. Pens or pencils.
Nice pens, or lots of pens?
Like fine tip pens.
Fine,
but it doesn't have to be like, I can buy them from like the dollar store, but they have to like write the right way, if that makes sense.
Excellent. Very good.
For your journaling books?
Yeah, for my I have my gratitude journal. I have my planner, and then we started a book for Kimball where I write notes to Kimball that I hope he reads when he's older. Awesome. And so those are my main, and then just like my lists on lists of things.
And always written, not digital.
Mostly. We did find that we had to, as for family life, we had to put a Google Calendar together, because unfortunately my written planner doesn't transfer to Tommy always. So we were having some communication challenges, because I'm like, oh, I wrote it down, but like he's not looking at my planner.
And one question to finish off. You are a very seasoned traveler. You travel, every time I've heard you seem to be in a different part of the world. Have you got any tips that, for those of us that are kind of traveling to races but not that often, have you got any tips that you found to really help you kind of dial in that kind of making sure that you don't forget anything, making sure it's painless, whether, you know, maybe jet lag, all of that sort of stuff. Any travel tips for people out there?
Yeah, lots of them I feel like, but a few that I feel like are probably the most important are with jet lag. As soon as you get somewhere, like never look back. You are now on whatever time you have just arrived in. And if you are like extremely tired and I would say don't take a nap, but like if you're extremely tired and need to take a nap, like be like 20 minutes and then don't push snooze, like get up, go outside, do something so that you can stay up. I also, if you can, and if you're managing your travel yourself, and like if you have the ability to choose when you get in, I usually like to choose, if it's a long trip, to get in more on the late side so that all I have to do is go to bed, because I find that a whole day of travel just exhausts me anyway. So I'm normally ready to go to bed at that time. I would say, for especially if you're traveling with like a bike and all your triathlon things, less tends to be more. Like you don't really need more, no matter how long you're there. You don't really need more than like 3 kits of like 3 bike kits, 3 run kits. I also find that, well, I'm probably like more to the extreme on this, but like I'll take normal clothes and never wear them. So I feel like you don't really need that many normal clothes if you're going on a, now, maybe if you're doing your holiday combined with your race, you might want some nicer objects, but I find that most of my training clothes can be normal clothes for me. I think you can do so much now on Google and like looking into the places you go before you get there, whether that's finding restaurants or grocery stores that are nearby, knowing, I just get confidence in preparation. So like knowing what way of transportation is going to be the best, whether it's Uber or a cab or train or whatnot. And also, like we do a lot of food delivery. So which food delivery app is available where you're going so that you can get like the food that you specifically want. And all that stuff is getting so crazy that like now where you can do like your grocery shopping through the apps and never have to leave the hotel. I think it's important to experience the places you are for the race, and like whether it's by swimming, biking, and running, or like going out to see something particular. I think it's really cool that we get to go some neat places. So outside of the race, kind of use your training to look around at your new atmosphere. And this, like, you can also check out the race course on Google Maps by like putting the little person down if you're like nervous about not being somewhere before. Like I'll take the course maps and then I'll have it so I can see the course map and see like the Google map person, and I'll put the blue line down and just kind of go through. So if you haven't done a race before, it can give you some insight. And if there's things that you like need, pack them with you.
Some great ideas.
Some great, exactly. I've got
one more. Sorry.
Go on.
Yeah.
One more, please.
Bring all your race stuff, like your helmet, your race suit, like the things you wouldn't be able to find and wherever you're going very easily, like your pedals and your like bike shoes and stuff. Bring them on your carry-on. So in case your luggage gets lost, you have like your pedals to put onto a new bike with your bike shoes, and that will make it a lot less stressful. And a lot of people have been putting the like air tags in their bike bags, because there's a lot of luggage getting lost. So if the airline says, we don't know where your bike is, you can say, but I do.
Well, I have some experience of that. My bike decided to stay in Kona for a whole week longer than I was. And the airline kept saying, well, we don't know where your bike is yet. I'm like, well, I can tell you exactly where it is. I know it's still sat on the runway at Kona.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, and there was like, I guess it was last year or something when I wasn't racing at the time, but I felt like most of the posts I was seeing from athletes were all like tracking their luggage and like showing where their luggage is, which wasn't with them. I think it was just a bad time for travel for a little bit.
It was brilliant. There's some really good advice
Really
there.
good.
I particularly like the idea of booking, kind of assessing the food delivery apps and the restaurants and all that sort of stuff beforehand, and the Google mapping the route. I'd never thought of that. So I've got Ironman Spain coming up shortly, so I will be doing that maybe even this evening. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Katie, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I hope you have an amazing season, and I hope you do make Paris. I hope you complete the hat trick there. And I'm sure it'll be a very different experience to Tokyo as well. So it'd be amazing to see you do special things in Paris. And but yeah, thank you so much. There's been some brilliant advice there.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
The best place to find Katie is on Instagram, where she is K Zaferes 6. So that's spelled Zaferes and then the number 6. K Zaferes 6. If you like what we do at the TRIBEathlon podcast, you've got to register for Tribe Talk. It's an email that comes out every 2 weeks, packed full of everything to do with swim, bike and run, but also nutritional help, business coaching and a whole lot more. Whether that's books, videos, TED Talks, apps or technologies, it's packed full of ideas that can help improve your sport, your life and your business. So register for it at TRIBEathlon.com and you'll be sure that every 2 weeks your inbox is full of some amazing ideas and resources to improve your life. And remember, this episode was brought to you by the Trusted Team and by Fourth Discipline. So if you want to find out more about how the Trusted Team can help you grow your business and improve your work-life balance, go to thetrusted.team. And if you want to find out more about how Fourth Discipline can help take your performance in sport and life to the next level, go to fourthdiscipline.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please do review it and share it, because it helps other people find what we think is really valuable learning lessons from amazing athletes. So please do that. You can also find the whole back catalogue at TRIBEathlon.com, and you can also find out about the TRIBEathlon app, which helps people find events, find people to train with and enjoy their events through their tribe. So check out TRIBEathlon.com.